All right, we are now live. Thank you very much. So we have, we're going to continue on with our meeting here. So we have rules and procedure that were forwarded to everyone, all of the members last week. I hope you have had a chance to review those. I'd like to entertain a motion at this time to adopt.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. It has been properly moved and second to adopt the rules and procedure. We would like, this will be done by roll call vote. Madam Secretary, please.
Madam Chair, hold, I have a question.
Yes, Delegate Carey.
Delegate Carey, I have my hand up. I just looking through the rules, nothing has changed, correct?
Well, we made one change last week, Delegate Carey, and that is to archive the recordings for 5 years.
Was that reflected in there? I didn't see it.
It is reflected in the, based on the amendment that was adopted last week.
Okay, but.
So it's under, I can tell you exactly where it is. It's at section 13.
Okay.
And it says minutes. And what we're adding is, the sentence is the tapes shall be available to the public. That's already there. What we've added is and archived for at least 5 years. That was adopted last meeting.
Yeah, I know. Thank you, Madam Chair. I missed that part. I was looking for what we had adopted. I just didn't see it. Okay.
No problem. So that is, so is there any other discussion on the rules and the motion that is up for consideration? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, please take the roll.
Delegate Bagnell,
Aye.
Delegate Barnes, Delegate Carey,
Aye.
Delegate Chang,
Yes.
Delegate Chisholm,
Aye.
Delegate Henson,
Yes.
Delegate Howard, Delegate Jones,
Aye.
Delegate Kipke,
Yes.
Delegate Lehman,
Yes.
Delegate Malone,
Aye.
Delegate Rogers,
Yes.
Delegate Saab,
Yes.
Chairman Bartlett.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the vote is 12-0 and the motion passes.
Thank you. So we have our 2021 rules and procedures for the Anne Arundel County delegation as adopted. Now we're going to move on to our bill hearing. We have a bill that is being sponsored by our wonderful Delegate Mary Lehman. The bill is House Bill 524. We will give Delegate Lehman the opportunity to introduce the bill. And if she has a witness, which I believe she does, the witness will have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I believe I have at least 2 witnesses. I see Zephyr Shah, and I know he'll do a great job, but I'm expecting at least 1 more. So Ms. Scott, if you could be on the lookout for someone, Lisa, what is her last name, Mary Jane? Sorrow.
I'm on.
Oh, she's on. Lisa, I did not see you. I'm sorry. Yes, Lisa's here. Thank you. So good morning again, colleagues. I am presenting to you House Bill 524. That bill is repossession for failure to pay rent. And I am asking for your favorable report. This is a bill that requires landlords to provide their rental license at the same time they file an eviction complaint against a tenant for failure to pay rent. Now, this bill applies to Anne Arundel and Prince George's counties only. As an aside, it is not a statewide bill because it can only be applied to jurisdictions that require landlords who own and rent residential properties to have a rental license. This concept that a landlord cannot proceed with an eviction filing without that license is rooted in case law, and you will hear more about that from the witnesses. So essentially the bill does 3 things. First, it just says that a landlord who files an eviction case based on failure to pay rent cannot do so without complying with the local licensing requirement, which both Anne Arundel and Prince George's counties have. I do want to emphasize this bill absolutely does not create a new licensing requirement. Those already exist in both of these counties. Secondly, the bill clarifies that a provisional or a temporary license does not constitute adequate proof of compliance with those local laws, and it therefore can't be used to support an eviction complaint. And third, the landlord has the burden of proving that the property is in fact licensed in accordance with all local rental property laws. And in Anne Arundel, of course, that would include whether it's in the unincorporated part of Anne Arundel County or whether that's in the city of Annapolis. So why is this bill needed? Residential rental property licenses provide a level of assurance that a property is safe and habitable. A temporary or provisional license that's typically issued before there is an inspection may never actually trigger an inspection or the issuance of the actual license. And without an inspection, there's no assurance that any given property will meet your local health and safety standards. Think of, whether appliances work or not, doors and windows function properly, there's adequate ventilation, no peeling paint, no visible mold and other hazards. In summary, we're talking about properties that we want to be safe for human habitation. So you are going to hear from some legal and housing experts that failure to pay rent dockets are busy, they're chaotic, and this bill will actually bring more order and accountability in those cases. It will not allow for continuances that are based on hastily applied for temporary or provisional licenses, and therefore it's going to help avoid putting tenants at risk of living in harmful conditions. I'm going to finish up by saying the overall premise of this bill is really simple, but it's powerful. Landlords who are not complying with local rental licensing requirements on the front end, they cannot evict tenants who they have no legal right to be renting to in the first place. And again, I asked for a favorable report. And if, Madam Chair, if you don't mind, if we could hear from the witnesses before we open it to questions, if that's okay with you.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. And whether, can Ms. Soro go next, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Thank you.
So Ms. Soro, you will have 2 minutes, please.
Okay. Good morning, all. It's nice to see all of you. Thank you for your time. The background for this bill is a case called McDaniel versus Baranowski. What this bill does is clarify that case. It's a 2011 case that was argued at the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals found that in order to use the summary ejectment process, the failure to pay process, a landlord must be licensed. So what this bill does is clarify for the courts, the landlords, and the clerks, all of the parties, what is required and when. There's been inconsistency in the years since the case came down in 2011 in how the license is required. When I read this bill, I immediately thought, I know the judiciary can't submit bills, but this would be something that the judiciary probably would want because it provides that clarity. You would have to have that license when you file your case. You'd have to have it as a landlord when you're pursuing your case. That isn't always clear, and it's not applied consistently. This would not change any requirements. All it would do is provide clarity for the court and the clerks as to when a license is required in order to maintain a lawsuit for failure to pay rent. The judges in the Court of Appeals judges actually during argument on the case said they did not believe that a landlord without a license is actually a landlord. So that landlord doesn't have claimant status and is not allowed to file according to case law. That's not being followed. The problem with regard to the temporary licenses is more specific to Prince George's County, where temporary licenses are being allowed to be used as proof of a license. And that gets the landlord over that threshold for filing. Temporary licenses are not permanent. They're often issued before an inspection has even taken place. So they don't comply with the rationale of the case, of the actual case law that is controlling at this time in the state of Maryland. Am I at my time?
You are. Thank you.
Okay.
Very much. You did perfect ending.
Madam Chair, just quickly, if I think Ms. Sorrow, a lot of our colleagues may know her, but I don't think we said her name and title at the start of her testimony. I don't believe.
Please.
That's true. Yes, Chairman Bartlett, I'm sorry. I meant to raise my hand when you were introducing everyone earlier. I wasn't in the bunch. My name is Lisa Sorrow. I'm General Counsel now for Arundel Community Development Services, the nonprofit housing and development agency for the county. We provide advice and counseling on housing issues to the county and also have a goal of improving habitable housing. Before I came to ACDS, I spent over 2 decades as a legal services attorney. And I actually argued before the Court of Appeals the case that set the standard in Maryland, the McDaniel versus Baranowski case. So I do have some background on this issue.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Your next witness, Delegate Lehman.
Zephyr Shaw from the Public Justice Center.
Thank you, Delegate Lehman, for inviting me, and Madam Chair Bartlett and members of the delegation. My name is Zephyr Shaw. I'm an attorney in the Human Right to Housing Project at the Public Justice Center. By and large, many of my renter clients who I represent or advise when they face eviction are in Baltimore City, but I do have opportunities, you might call that, to defend renters in Prince George's County and Anne Arundel County. And what's common to all these cases and cases across the state and these very large docket of eviction cases, which exceeds 600,000 filings each year, is that landlords have to state on a form complaint in the district court that they are registered and licensed if a local law applies, but very little happens after that to ensure that the landlord has clean hands. And this bill is really just a clean hands bill, making sure that there's not only conformity to the McDaniel case, which says, as Ms. Sarrow said, that the landlord has clean hands in order to have status as a claimant, but that we actually operationalize that. And then that's kind of the problem that this bill, as well as a Baltimore City bill sponsored by Delegate Attar, both tackle, which is the problem where there's a burden shifting that happens. It's the burden of the landlord to show that they are a lawfully operating landlord. But in actuality, in the district court, and unaddressed really by the Court of Appeals, was whether after a sort of bald assertion on the complaint is made that the landlord is compliant, whether there's any sort of going behind the number, so to speak, or going behind the allegation to see if that's a true averment in the complaint. And statistically in Baltimore City, we saw that very high percentages of landlords use outdated information about their licensing or completely just fake information. It may not be ill will either. It may just be that they don't understand what licensing is. So this bill, just importantly, it doesn't require the sheriff in the counties to add more papers to service of process for these complaints. This is only a burden at the time of filing to show the clerk that they are licensed. It doesn't call on clerks to make a decision of whether to accept. We know the judiciary would oppose that if it did that. And then additionally at trial, the landlord would show, even in cases where the landlord, where the tenant isn't present, show that there is a license, so that the court has proper jurisdiction over the case, so that the judgment is not susceptible to being invalidated after it is entered. So these are prescriptions that Delegate Attar worked carefully with the sheriff and the judiciary as pertains to Baltimore City. The language in this bill is virtually identical. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Shaw. I'd like to introduce one of our guests who has arrived, Senator Sarah Alfred. If you want to wait. Yeah, there you go. Okay. So now I'm going to open it up for questions. And I actually have a question that is anyone, sponsored, Lisa or Zafar, whoever wants to answer is fine. Are you finding now without this that tenants or attorneys are able to dismiss cases based on a lack of standing or some any grounds for affirmative defenses such right now for a motion to dismiss? And if they're not able to do that now, would they have the ability to do that if this bill were passed?
Madam Chair, I am not an attorney, so I am going to leave that to the two attorneys to tackle. I do understand, if I understand correctly, that standing is tied a little bit, I think, indirectly into the issue of whether the landlord has the rental license, but I'm not entirely clear on your question either, so.
I think I can tackle that one. It really is a standing issue. If a landlord doesn't have the required license for their jurisdiction, then that landlord isn't a landlord for purposes of a failure to pay rent action, that summary ejectment action that can happen in 5 days from filing to hearing to a judgment against the tenant. So what this bill would do is it wouldn't make that motion to dismiss a necessity because the petition, the complaint for failure to pay rent would not be filed without proof of the license, proof that they have standing to sue. Oftentimes what happens is the tenants don't even know that they have this defense, and the case just goes right on through. We have some good judges in Arundel County that will actually bring it up themselves. But generally, if a motion to dismiss is not raised, the case goes right on through, whether the landlord is licensed or not.
Okay, thank you. I see that we have several questions. I need to make an adjustment to the agenda. I'm going to make this adjustment and then we'll go back to our hearing. Delegate Shanika Henson, Delegate Brian Chisholm, Delegate Saab all have questions. If you could hold your questions just for a moment, I'm going to make an adjustment so that we can accommodate Senator Chris Van Hollen so that he can go off and do the work that we appreciate him doing so very much. Thank you, Senator Holland. Senator Van Hollen, could you go ahead and let us know what's going on the federal level? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the adjustment. I appreciate it. And it is great to be here with you and the entire Anne Arundel County Annapolis delegation. Let me start by thanking all of you for the work you're doing for all of our constituents during this very difficult time. Thank you for introducing Jalen Money early on, who's sort of my eyes and ears and ambassador to Anne Arundel County. And great to be on here with County Executive Stuart Pittman, who I spoke to just the other day on the vaccine situation. So what I'd like to do is just give a sketch of what we're doing and then take whatever questions you may have. First, in terms of the coronavirus relief package, both in terms of fighting COVID-19 and also dealing with the economic pain. It was too long in coming, but in December, we were able to pass that bipartisan bill, $900 billion. As you know, it continues many of the programs in the CARES Act, the PPP program for small businesses, although I will say much better targeted to the truly needy small businesses and minority-owned businesses. It also includes an extension of the unemployment insurance through mid-March at $400 a week. And then importantly for Anne Arundel County, while it doesn't provide any direct relief to state and local government, and we're working on that in the next round. It does provide substantial resources to Anne Arundel County institutions. And I just wanted to mention that so everyone here knows what's coming from the federal government. So Anne Arundel Public Schools, for example, received $48 million from this package. Anne Arundel Community College received $9.6 million in relief, and 2.1 million of that is supposed to go to help students who are struggling. And then I was just following the conversation about this legislation on tenant protection. We are also extending the eviction moratorium at the federal level. As you're hearing, it's not perfect, it's not ironclad. The other piece of that, of course, is that all of us are concerned that whenever the moratorium lifts, we could have a tsunami of evictions because of people unable to pay their rent. And so this most recent bill that passed in December did include a rental assistance fund, and Anne Arundel County will receive, and I think they've actually received it, $17 million approximately that came directly to the county to help with rental assistance. And those funds are supposed to go to the landlord on behalf of the tenants for qualifying tenants. So I wanted to put that on your radar screen. Quickly on the vaccines, and as I said, I talked to County Executive Pittman. We all understand that there's a huge amount of frustration here. There are two big pieces, of course. One is the national supply, and the other is how we're distributing it at the state and local level. In terms of national supply, the Senate Democratic Caucus just had a briefing yesterday from Jeff Zients, who's President Biden's coordinator for COVID-19. They're doing a number of things. You probably saw that they are purchasing another 200 million doses so that we'll have enough available to vaccinate the American population. Now, those, of course, are not coming online right now. In terms of the immediate supply, they're boosting it by around 16% over what was being delivered. And then they're also going to be working to address other issues in the supply chain, right? You've probably seen that some of these syringes are designed in a way where some of the doses are left over, and we want to save every bit. And so they're going to ramp up the purchase of syringes that use every dose without wastage. So there are a number of things that are going on at the federal level, the distribution level system at the state level, the congressional delegation. I bring my greetings from all of them, Senator Cardin and my House colleagues, Anthony Brown and Dutch Ruppersberger and John Sarbanes. But we had a briefing with the acting Secretary of Health at the state level, Dennis Schrader, where we got a briefing from him, but also expressed our frustrations with the state distribution system because the CDC numbers show that Maryland as a state is ranked 45th out of 50, so about fifth worst in terms of how much of the supply it's received has actually gotten into people's arms. So we look forward to working with you and getting any information you have that can be helpful to us. Of course, you can pass it on to the state folks and the governor, but we can too. So we want to coordinate with you to make sure that these distribution systems are working effectively. My understanding is that the Anne Arundel County Health Department is actually getting a lot of the vaccine it's received out quickly, and also making sure that it is trying to address populations that have been hardest hit. But some of the other doses that are going through other channels are not being delivered as quickly as we'd like to people's arms. So let me stop there, Madam Chair, and happy to try and answer any questions people have.
Thank you so much, Senator, for being here and sharing that information with us. Delegate Seth Howard, is your question directed to the senator, or is that?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. You go right ahead.
Okay, let me pull it up. Is it more at the state level as far as vaccine? Because today, the number I'm looking at, Anne Arundel County, so it's more of a local level, 22,275 vaccines with 16,251 administrator and 80.2% effective rate. So is it more at the state level or is it more at the local level?
I think that what we're seeing is there, as I said, there are two big pieces. One is the supply, and there's a federal supply, and it's been constrained. The manufacturers are working really their production facilities at full speed. As you may have heard, Johnson & Johnson may bring on another vaccine. We're expecting every day now. But in terms of the distribution at the state level, the state now has different distribution channels. Some of it goes to the county health department, some of it's going to hospitals, some of it's going to pharmacies. And there has not been a lot of transparency as to where it all is. For example, in Anne Arundel County, some of it went to the Anne Arundel Hospital Center, but then they couldn't use it right away, and so they gave it back to the county. So I just, if the CDC rankings that I'm talking about, those are for the state of Maryland. And
but I mean, those rankings are a combination of local jurisdictions' slow rollout on the vaccine. So that's why we're rating that low.
Well, but here's the issue.
In the military, you're only as fast as your slowest man. So
yeah, that's true. But the issue is, at the state level, it's not like they're saying to a county, Anne Arundel County, we have this much for Anne Arundel County. How do you want to distribute it? They're saying, we're going to distribute this much to the county health department. And then they're also putting it through different channels, Anne Arundel, hospitals and pharmacies. And the amount that goes to pharmacies and hospitals in Anne Arundel County comes out of the overall Anne Arundel County allocation. So right now, I think some of the pharmacies and the contracts with the pharmacies, we're seeing that the rate of it being those doses being put into people's arms has been slower, for example, than Anne Arundel County Health Department. Now, look, everyone's trying to work this out. Different states have adopted different models, and I think if we can get our information flowing correctly, then we can make sure that the doses get where they're needed. All of us share the same goal, obviously.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. And if you hear of anything, let us know. We should just be sharing information about.
Indeed. Do we have any other questions for the senator before? Okay, Senator, one moment, please. Okay, so Senator Van Hollen, thank you so much for being here today and taking time out. And we really appreciate the work that you're doing and all of the congressional delegation.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And let me just say as I sign off that we are working, as I'm sure you've seen, on another round of emergency relief. The bill that the Biden-Harris administration has submitted to the Congress. And we're hoping that additional relief will be on its way soon. Thank you all very much.
Great. Thank you. Take care.
You too.
Okay, so we will resume our hearing. Thank you very much, everyone, for your accommodation there. So we're going to resume our hearing. And the first hand that I saw was Delegate Shanika Henson, and then we will move on over to Delegate Chisholm. Delegate Saab, you no longer have your question? Okay, all right. Delegate Shanika Henson, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Delegate Lehman, for bringing this very important and significant legislation. I didn't see a fiscal note on the legislation. Has one been put out yet?
Delegate Henson, thank you. I appreciate the question. I have not seen one either. My staff is looking for it right now. I had not seen one as of yesterday, but we will hopefully, while we're still in this meeting, we'll get that information.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about the impact of the counties. It's my understanding that with the licensing and the inspections that they have the ability to charge a fee for that service, and that oftentimes the fees even have the ability to generate some revenue because it can generate fines as well and the fees and the fines are a part of the county's revenue that they anticipate. So is it your understanding as well that they can charge a fee and it would maybe be cost neutral to the counties, if not a revenue generator?
Yes, thank you for that. I can answer that question in Prince George's only because I served for 8 years on the Prince George's County Council. I believe it was in my first term when the new county executive and council were reviewing our budget and looking for possible sources of revenue. The rental license fee in Prince George's County at that time had not been raised in something like 20 years, and it actually lagged behind significantly at the county level the licensing fee that municipalities within Prince George's were charging. Prince George's is somewhat unique. It has 27 municipalities, and small cities like the city of Berwyn Heights, for example, had a rental licensing fee, I believe in excess of $200, while the county's fee had been stuck for years and years at $50. And so it depends. I don't know what that fee is in Anne Arundel. I don't know if Ms. Sorrow may know. I do not. But yes, that is in probably every jurisdiction. I'm sure there's a fee, and it is meant to offset in small part the cost of housing inspections.
Thank you, Delegate Lehman. Madam Chair, may I ask a question of Ms. Sorrow? Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. You mentioned your work in Annapolis on the cases that were there represented by legal aid. In the case that was before our administrative judge in the district court, Judge John McKenna, I believe in that case, Judge McKenna said, I find that the issue of deciding whether or not HACA should be exempt from the licensing requirement of the city is a law, is a legislative act, a legislative decision. Do you recall Judge McKenna saying that it was ripe for legislation to come forward to decide if the city of Annapolis should be exempt from the licensing regime there? Do you believe that was his intention, that we do pass some sort of law like Delegate Lehman has introduced?
Actually, and good morning, Delegate Henson. Actually, what that case was about was what we tried that case over was whether HACA, Housing Authority of the City of Annapolis, was exempted somehow from the City of Annapolis's licensing laws. And over a period of about 6 months and 6 different trial dates and hearings, the court concluded that there was not an exemption from the licensing law for the Housing Authority of the City of Annapolis, and that therefore the Housing Authority did not have standing to sue for failure to pay rent in the summary ejectment process. He did say that if there was to be an exemption, the law would be required to be changed to provide for that exemption. And the one thing I want to make really clear is that this would not change who is required to be licensed. So there wouldn't be any additional licensing that would be necessary, because if the landlords want to use the summary ejectment process, which is the quickest way to evict someone for failure to pay, they already have to have a license. All this bill does is it eliminates the step where the case gets before the judge, and that's when the judge notices or the tenant notices, hey, wait a minute, they're supposed to be licensed and they're not, and moves to dismiss. So this would just eliminate that first step of landlords who are not entitled to use the process from getting in front of a court or getting in front of a judge. It would stop the filing at the front end, but it wouldn't require any additional licensing. There are some properties that don't require a license. It's single mom and pop type rentals that don't require a license. They would not be required to go out and get a license because the law doesn't require them to have one. Therefore, they're in compliance with the law.
And Madam Chair, if I could answer Delegate Henson's first question about a fiscal note, because there is no hearing date yet in the standing committee, and for those of you on judiciary, I believe Delegate or Chair Bartlett is, this bill will be going to judiciary. Last year, the bill you heard about that's exactly the same, but for Baltimore City, Delegate Attar's bill was referred to Environment and Transportation. This year, these bills are going to judiciary. So it will go there, but there is no date yet. And so there is no fiscal note yet. And I will, be willing to alert you myself, Delegate Henson, if you'd like, as soon as we see that fiscal note, as well as the rest of the delegation, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Delegate
Delegate
Lehman.
Lehman. Thank you, Delegate Henson. Did you have any follow-up?
May I just ask a question of Mr. Shaw as well?
Okay, very briefly.
Very briefly, Mr. Shaw, I wanted to make sure that it was fleshed out, Ms. Sorrell's point there. We know that there is an underground rental market, for better or worse, it exists. If a landlord is unlicensed and they should be licensed and they are renting to someone, is there still a process for them to evict that is outside of the summary ejectment process?
That's a really great question, Delegate Henson. This is an issue of some uncertainty in the Court of Appeals and its jurisprudence, because McDaniel was limited to fair to pay rent cases. So there are questions of, well, can an unlicensed landlord use the tenant holdover action or the breach of lease action or the wrongful detainer action? That's unresolved right now, although the Court of Appeals will be be looking and evaluating cert petitions filed by Maryland Legal Aid in 2 cases regarding tenant holding over cases. So I think that just in the broadest terms, yes, the answer is probably yes. Landlords can take other steps through lease non-renewal, potentially a breach of lease case, although I think that's a weaker case. Wrongful detainer is another possibility. I think that's all still on the table for landlords because McDaniel was confined to fair to pay rent cases. This bill is also confined to fair to pay rent cases.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Delegate Henson. Delegate Chisholm.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning to everybody. So if I'm to understand this, a landlord applies for a rental license, gets a 90-day temporary license that you cannot use to evict. So you're waiting for your permanent license, which requires an inspection, correct? By a compliance officer. Okay.
That's correct.
The problem we had last year when Ms. Maddox came in from HACA was she didn't have enough inspections. And I don't know if anybody's applied for anything in Anne Arundel County. It's kind of tough to get inspectors out there, especially in this situation. Is there a contingency plan for, let's say, a landlord applies for the temporary license, gets that for 90 days, that 90 days comes, and it could be another year before compliance officers are able to come out there. Has that been considered? Is there a stopgap in there? Because you're then holding a landlord up from being able to process his legal eviction, which in this point is still taking a long time as well, from what I understand. So has that ever come up? Is there a consideration of that? Anybody can answer.
I will just answer briefly that there is not language in there right now to consider that scenario, but I will allow Mr. Shaw to answer that.
Well, the answer to that is that a landlord who is renting lawfully already has a license, right? If they don't have a license, when they want to file a failure to pay rent case and they are required to have a license, then they have been renting their property unlawfully and not in compliance with the county or city code.
Well, what if they started renting these properties in the situation we're in right now, started in January, February, or March, and we're given that 90-day temporary license, and then we shut everything down, but whoever they started to rent to, they had every intent to do this legally. They had the 90-day temporary and they're waiting on the permanent, but they can't get an inspector out there. We're now 10.5 months into this pandemic, and they could be 9 months without collecting rent with a mortgage over their head and can't go through the legal process, even though they had every intent of being legally compliant and a legal landlord. Well, they're all legal landlords to be able to evict. I understand that part of the law. What situation would they be in right now?
I think that issue is more appropriately addressed maybe by other legislation that would allow for perhaps video inspections, some way of doing inspections when you're in the middle of an emergency. But again, in order to be lawfully renting your property, you don't have to, it's not a temporary license that assures that the health and safety inspection has been completed. It's the permanent license after an inspection has taken place. And that's what the case law was designed to ensure, the health and safety of a property before it's rented.
I understand. I just, and it sounds great in theory, but application wise at HACA, we had a huge mold problem over there and nobody could do the inspections. And there were people living in bad conditions, dangerous conditions, and it wasn't to the fault of anybody other than it was a lack of manpower and being able to get some of these inspectors out there, and I'm sure that will happen. So I'm just I'm looking out for both sides here. I'm just asking the question.
Just to clarify though, the problem at the Housing Authority of the City of Annapolis was that they had not been licensed in decades.
Okay.
And there was a finding that they needed to be licensed. And so there was a huge crush of, 790 units that needed to be licensed at once so that the Housing Authority could then use the summary ejectment process for failure to pay. Had they been, staggered and been going on with annual inspections, it would not have been the same crush of needed inspections as there was.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
If I could just add just really briefly to
Sure.
the answer, Delegate, is what we've seen is that where particularly with a lawyer, that a renter does raise the fact that the property lacks a valid license, that there wasn't an inspection for licensing. Typically, if a judge is going to dismiss that case, they say, well, I'm dismissing without prejudice. So you can bring this case back, go get your license, go get your inspection, get your license, then come back. And that creates the financial incentive for the landlord to do the inspection. I understand what you're saying is that sometimes there's a manpower issue. You can't get the inspector in, but just as often there is simply an interest question. Is the landlord very invested in getting these steps fulfilled? And the court taking sort of creating this barrier, so to speak, really does help remove the incentive not to comply and creates an incentive to comply. And that's one of really the core principles of this bill. Thanks.
Yep, I understand. I'm just trying to protect some of the people that are indeed trying to comply, but running into this roadblock. Thank you.
Very
Madam
good.
Chair, if I could just say quickly, my non-lawyerly response to Delegate Chisholm, and with all due respect, is I don't think any of us legislates, based on the staffing levels, the ability of executive branch agencies to do their jobs. If we did that, we would pass hardly any legislation at all. At least that's how I feel. Thank you.
Not passing legislation would make me very happy.
Okay. All right, so we're going to move
No,
on
we
to,
differ on that.
we're going to move on to Delegate Saab and then Delegate Malone.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have actually a couple questions. Now, with this under current law, do we need anybody needs a separate license for each property? Or is it one license that covers the entire portfolio? It seems like you need a $400 every 2 years for any property that has 2 or more dwelling. Am I correct on that?
Each unit needs its own license. That's correct. And
Okay.
that this legislation doesn't change that.
Right. Well, it doesn't, but it forces the landlord that small landlord that they may have a dwelling of 2 units to get that license, which will add the cost. And just keep in mind that this cost will be passed along to the renter.
But Delegate Saab, that is the law. I emphasize that right up front. This does not change or create a new licensing requirement. That is the law. So if you have an objection to that, you would have to take that up separately in separate legislation. That is current law.
But it does delay the ability for them to file for eviction because they don't have license. The other question I have on the bill, and it's more
That's the purpose.
on line 12, it says that you have to provide the license at the time of filing. So can we reject the filing and say, go get a license and come back, and then you can file? Or can you still file and bring the license to the trial? Would it give you time to bring it if you don't have it? Because like
No, I believe you cannot file. I believe.
I'm sorry?
You cannot file and then go and get your license and come back. You have to have it in hand.
Okay, so on line 20, it says here, if the landlord is required to provide evidence of rental property under the section B2 of the section, at the trial, the landlord has the burden of proof by a preponderance of the evidence that the property is licensed by the county in compliance. So it's just with the compliance part. So what this bill does is basically you cannot file unless if you have a license. And in some cases, the license can take 90 days because they still have to go inspect. Or no, is the license just an administrative license? There's no inspection required at the time.
Delegate Saab, I believe you're asking the same question that Delegate Chisholm asked.
No.
Well, could Ms. Sorrow provide any clarification?
Right. There are two provisions in this proposed legislation that would, or 2 points at which proof of licensing would be required. One, when you file, you have to show the clerk that you do have a license. You just show the clerk your license and you can file. Then the next step is there's a trial on the failure to pay rent case. The tenant can raise a lack of compliance with local licensing laws. However, if the landlord then has the license, they meet their burden of proof, essentially. This prevents folks from getting through the initial stage with something that isn't actually a license. So if they have been truthful when they've filed, then they have the license when they get to the trial stage. That's my reading. And maybe Mr. Shaw has a different view.
So they don't have to show the license. They have to say that we have a license and then at trial show it.
They have to allow it to be inspected by the clerk when they file. And then when they get to trial, they need to be able to prove that they have it. That's one element of proof. So they have to prove that they have standing when they file, and then they have to prove the elements of their case, that they're a proper landlord, they have a license, and that the money is owed in order to get possession of their property.
Okay. Yeah, can you clarify that?
Well, that was, you still have questions? You know, I will say, Delegate Saab, that we are going to, the public health, we do have a new subcommittee, which is our public health subcommittee. They will be they will be having a meeting to discuss this bill, and they will be providing to us at the next delegation meeting their recommendation. So Delegate Shanika Henson is the chair of the Public Health Committee. Do we have a date when that committee is going to meet yet?
We do, Delegate Bartlett. The date for the Public Health Subcommittee meeting is going to be February 8th, I believe. I want to confirm that. I'll make sure I confirm it in the chat, but I believe it is February 8th.
Okay. And so if there are, if you want to, be able to ask any more questions that aren't clear, then, feel free, or either perhaps offline. And I'm only saying that because I see that the answers are kind of becoming the same. Delegate Malone?
Ms. Sorrow, if you could just outline who needs a license and who doesn't.
Sure. In Anne Arundel County, there's the county code. Shoot, I usually have it right handy on my screen, and I don't right now. But the county code requires that anyone with 2 or more dwelling units, contiguous dwelling units, needs to have a license in order to rent their properties, unless it's a duplex and the landlord lives in one side. And in that case, they would have to have a triplex or triplex in order to be required to be licensed. So if they're renting the duplex, the second unit of their duplex property, they would not be required to have a license. If they're renting both of the units, then they would be required to have a license. But it's in the county code.
Thank you.
Same with the city. The city has its own requirements. I can't recall if it's exactly the same. It might be, it might be 4 units in the city. I can't recall, but they're very clear. The county code and the city ordinance.
Thank you.
Okay, so I see no further questions at the time. I'm going to close the question and hearing on this bill HB 524. The Public Health Committee will be meeting to discuss this bill, and Delegate Shanika Henson will put out the information on that. Please join that committee if you want to discuss this a little bit further or go a little deeper on it. Now I'd like to invite our county executive, Stuart Pittman, to present to us his legislative priorities for this 2021 session.
Thank you. I will first, just very briefly on COVID. It's only been a week since I briefed you on COVID, but it's a very fast moving situation. Did have a good meeting with the governor yesterday about the logistics of the vaccine allocation. Made a strong case for local health departments coming first because we have built the capacity there with taxpayers' funds, and we want to be able to use that capacity. We could be doing 10,000 doses a week in our health department. I think we talked about that last week. Unfortunately, we're not there, and we're not close to there. So we'll continue to work on that. The budget town halls are going on right now, and they're virtual, and they've been very successful. People are doing their 2 minutes of testimony, telling us what to spend our money on. The outlook isn't as bad as we thought it was going to be. We were pretty conservative last year in how we budgeted, so we have a significant fund balance that we can do some one-time expenditures from, and our incremental revenues year over year are projected to be about what they are most years, in the $60 to $80 million range of new funds, which helps us pay for the things that we owe, and maybe a little bit more. So it won't be it'll be a fairly lean year, but not the disaster that we were forecasting last year. Long-term forecast is a little less clear. Plan 2040 is going to the county council this Monday. It's our 20-year general development plan, and that's something that we've been working on for 2 years. Actually, before I came in, they just started on it, getting input from the public. And I encourage people to take a look at it. There's been a lot of community engagement on it, and I hope that the council likes it as much as I do, and that it gets through the council before it's budget time, and we can move forward with that. Then there will be regional plans in 9 regions throughout the county that follow up. And I just want to thank all of my staff, the staff that's here, but throughout county government. I think it's pretty clear that they have done incredible work this year in difficult circumstances. Health and Human Service agencies have been delivering in ways and creating programs that we had never even dreamed of, filling gaps in the safety net. And all of our agencies are doing amazing work. Public safety, we've really focused on in our budget the last couple of years. So significant increases in staffing and wages in this last contract, where we finally got police and fire to the average of the region, so that recruitment will be easier. We have a new class that is going to be graduating this spring from the fire department. that is the most diverse class in the history of the county by quite a bit. So we're pleased with that. And of course, you met our new police chief last week. The only other thing countywide, before I get into a couple of pieces of legislation, is that we do have this new team of 2 people that we call Arundel Stat, and they've opened a new website called Open Arundel, which is the performance metrics for all of our departments. And so the public and you and we and everybody can look at how we're measuring progress and how we're doing on those measures. It's growing all the time. There's new GIS software and mapping, so people can look in their communities and see what government services are being provided, what's going on with development, and a lot of information to increase community engagement and transparency. And it's one of the things I'm most proud of over this last year. We are very concerned about how the federal funds that will be coming to the state will be distributed to local health departments. I talked to the governor about this yesterday. There is, as the senator told us, $50 million for vaccine distribution and $350 million for what they call testing, tracing, and COVID mitigation, which we believe can also be used for vaccine distribution. And we believe that the intent is that most of those funds go to local health departments who are on the ground doing the work. And we know that the money has gone to the state, and we hope that it will be distributed in a timely manner because it's needed now. And we hope that it will be done in a way with as little regulatory burden as possible to our health department. So I'd appreciate your help in keeping an eye on that, and we will as well, and give the state health department guidance on how best to do that. Couple bills, one that you may be hearing about or may have heard about a little bit that I'm very supportive of is what's being called the Tax Relief for Working Families Act. Some call it the Progressive Income Tax Bill. And we've looked at the numbers of what this would do if passed as written. It would allow counties that are at 3.2, which we're not. We're at 2.8. It would allow those counties to go to 3.5 for only income over $500,000 for individuals, 600,000 for families. So if you make 700,000 and you're a family, 100,000 of your income would be at a slightly higher rate. It would, if we did that in our county, it would affect 1.4% of our taxpayers and generate approximately $16 million if we took them all the way to 3.5. About half of which would probably be used to lower taxes on the 98.6% of our population that's not in that category, and still have a little bit left over to do some services, possibly contribute it to our new housing trust fund, whatever else it looks like is needed most. So you'll be seeing that. We've had hearings in both the House and the Senate, and we encourage you to support that to help our local families out in this difficult time. Another is the Housing Trust Fund bill. That's SB 566. And I want to thank Delegate Henson and Alfred and Bartlett for their work with us on this. This is one of the 4 pieces that we have promised our residents on affordable housing. So we passed workforce housing legislation at the county level, fair housing legislation. We want to do moderately priced dwelling unit set-asides for new development, as most Central Maryland counties have. And then the 4th part is creation of a housing trust fund for affordable housing programs. And the mechanism in this bill would enable Anne Arundel County to do an increase in the real estate transfer tax and fees for properties valued at over $1 million. This has been done in other jurisdictions. And so we ask that you support that as well. There's an important oversight bill that Senators Bidle and Alfred have worked on for Visit Annapolis and Anne Arundel that would simply allow the withholding of funds if they do not comply with audits or submit the reports that they're required to submit. So it's just to make sure that we're getting the information that we need. And then a 4th one that you may hear about, HB 594. You may have heard that we did a successful pilot in Anne Arundel County that was really generated through my work with the Anne Arundel County Farm Bureau to allow the county, we used CARES Act money to do this, to pay the cost of processing deer and reimburse hunters for some of their effort and their time if the meat all was donated to our Anne Arundel County Food Bank. And 250 deer were donated. And there were some questions about whether it was legal. So what this bill does is there's a ban on bounty for wildlife. And there are exemptions in that bill for farmers and hunters feeding the hungry, which is a similar program. So this just adds an exemption. So if local governments want to do programs like this to get protein to their food banks, that it's clear that they're able to do that. I have a long list here that Pete gave me of some of your bills, and I think because we probably have a lot of other things we want to do this morning, I will not go through that whole list. But I just want to tell you that we're following your bills, we're watching them. We thank you for doing them, and we'll be there with you, testifying in support or possibly against, depending on the legislation. But Pete is always working the halls. He's got Ethan helping him, and he's got Hannah Dyer as well. We feel like we're better staffed this year. Jenny Probstel also in our office is doing a lot of the behind the scenes work, monitoring, I think, about 600 bills. And all of our departments, of course, have been notified about bills that affect them. So we're fully engaged, probably more than we have in the past, and stand ready to work with you on whatever it is that you want us to do.
Great. Thank you, Mr. County Executive. Delegate Seth Howard, question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mr. County Executive, you said that you were willing to raise the tax rate to 3.5% on 1.4% of the population, generating about $16 million for the other 98.4 to lower their taxes. Walk me through that. How are you going to take $16 million generated and use that to lower taxes on the other 98.4%?
Well, I'm not saying we are going to do it. If the bill passes, then we're gonna take a look at whether or not to do it. But we had our budget office run these numbers so that we would see what the math does. And so how you do it is the comptroller who we've met with about this has a new system where they're able to do brackets for income tax, different brackets for different counties. What I didn't mention is that the Maryland Association of Counties fully supports this bill and testified in support of it at both hearings. More Republican than Democrat counties in the state, and the reason that they supported it is because they support local autonomy, the authority to be able to make our own decisions about how we tax our residents. So it's simple math. It's the same way progressive taxes are done at the state and federal level. In fact, local taxes were progressive until 1999 when they were a piggyback on the state progressive rates. But we went to a flat rate in 1999. And given the impacts of this pandemic, where the higher income folks have done pretty well and the lower income folks have been losing their jobs, we believe that progressive local income taxes make sense as well.
So is this sort of a old throwback to the jobs created and/or saved, which is a moniker of, we're not really sure, we think, or is this actual? So this $16 million roughly, and your numbers, not mine, will result in lower taxes for the vast majority of residents in Anne Arundel County.
That increased, you could call it a millionaire's tax, whatever you want to call it, for
Right.
those folks. That's revenue to the county. When we do our budget, we can balance that out. We could use all of it to lower taxes on other brackets. We could use all of it for increased spending. I mean, that's what local governments do when they budget it, that we would have the authority to make those decisions.
So it could not
Council, of
necessarily
course,
go to lower taxes for the other 98% of the residents.
Say that again?
It would not necessarily go to lowering the taxes of the other 98% of the residents. It could be used for a various amount of different things, determined by the county and the county executive.
Just like every other revenue that comes into the general fund, it can be used for anything that the county council decides, really, that with the budget that's brought to them by our office. So yeah, it's just revenue. Yeah.
Okay, well, you had said you were going to use it to lower the taxes on the other 98%. I was just looking for some clarification on how that.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't made decisions. If we're given the authority to do this, we haven't even made a decision about whether to do it, but those are the options before us. And to be open with you about it, the way I see it is that we would do some of both, depending on what our needs look like when we get through them all. But we always have more requests for good programs than we have funds.
Sure.
So I suspect that some would be used to lower taxes on the 98.6 and some would be used to do programs that are urgent.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Are there any other questions? Delegate Saab.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I want to follow up a little bit on Delegate Howard's question, because I'm a little confused too, because I know a couple of days ago, Mr. County Executive, you put on Facebook I guess advertising and calling it the local tax relief for working families, House Bill 319. It says a teacher's making $50,000 a year will save money. A lawyer making $100,000 a year will save money. A CEO making $750 a year will pay a little bit more. So which one is it? Is it saving money, or is it just taking the revenues and spending it elsewhere? I mean, I think we should be honest with our constituents, and there should be some truth in advertising. Because if whoever the next county executive is, it's up to him and up to the county council, or her, up to the county council, then we just allowed them to raise taxes, or on certain people claimed that it's going to save lower income people in taxes because that's how we sold it to them. But yet we took the money and nobody saved any. So can you just tell me which one is it?
What that graphic showed you was just what I just described, that we would have the authority under this bill to be able to lower taxes on people at one level, and paying for that, because you always have to pay for a tax cut, paying for that through the increase on that 1.4%. And it's like every other tax, like our property tax. We have the authority, and the next council will have the authority, and the next county executive will have the authority to raise our property tax rates. There's no limit on that. That's what governments do to create revenue. So this is no different than that.
Well, I mean, the government also can cut spending to create revenues. But so in the same post, and I'm just reading it now again. So it says so there's nothing in the bill that says someone would make more than 500,000 or 750. So it's really up in the air to the next county executive, or for you, or for the county council to determine what that threshold, what that number is.
What the bill does is it said right now there's a maximum allowable tax rate for counties of 3.2%. 50% of Maryland counties are at that rate. We're far below that. We're the fourth lowest in the state at 2.8%. What this bill does is allows counties to go to 3.5, but only for income above 500,000 for individuals, 600,000 for families. Does that make sense?
The bill specifies 500,000 of income of a family.
It says the top tax bracket for the Maryland taxes. So Maryland taxes are progressive. They have a higher rate for those folks. So it identifies that bracket. And that bracket is, and it's not even income, it's taxable income. So you could have 700,000 income and only 500,000 of it's taxable after deduction. So you'd still not have to pay the extra money. It's similar to the millionaire's tax that Maryland had and then repealed. It's that same top bracket.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I could not tell who was first, so Delegate Bagnall and Delegate Lehman have questions. Delegate Bagnall.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, County Executive Pittman. And I apologize. I think you said this, but I missed it. Can you just remind us where we compare in terms of the tax landscape with the other 23 jurisdictions, and also the other large counties, the other comparable large counties in Maryland?
On property tax, we're the seventh lowest of 24 counties. On income tax, we're the fourth lowest of 24 counties. And in Central Maryland, I believe all but Frederick are the top 3.2% rate. And I believe we're the lowest of all the Central Maryland counties on our property tax rate. And we're proud of that. I mean, I talk about that at the budget town halls, and we're proud of the fact that we have lower tax rates than others.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Delegate Lehman.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. County Executive. You're doing an excellent job. Thank you for all that good information. Very quickly, going back to the COVID vaccine, have there been issues in Anne Arundel? I know I've gotten a lot of complaints from my Prince George's constituents about residency issues and whether or how Anne Arundel is, prioritizing for in-county versus out-of-county residents. There's just a lot of confusion around this in some other counties where, people were crossing county lines to get vaccinated, in some cases in Prince George's being turned away even after they had, made a valid appointment, got confirmation, showed up for it, and then were told, no, we're prioritizing now for residents of our own county. Has that come up, and can you explain?
It has. I had a conversation with our health officer at 8 o'clock this morning about this very topic. Yes, Prince George's County, the county executive announced just a couple days ago that they would no longer be vaccinating folks from outside the county, and I've seen a lot of emails from people and who went to other counties or went to Prince George's lately and were told they couldn't get vaccinated. We have, unfortunately, I have a chart here that shows by county compared to population, how many doses we get. And it's pretty clear that the large Central Maryland counties are all the ones with the lowest dosage rate that we're getting from the state when they allocate. We even have a map that shows the outlying counties have, for health departments, they're getting many more doses, particularly for health departments. But the capacity in health departments to vaccinate is generally in Central Maryland. So we are frustrated that we're not getting more. So the question came up about, because we know we're vaccinating people from outside our county, a fair number of them. Right now, we still have 10,000 in our 100,000 person pre-registration system of people over 75. And we really feel strongly that they're the ones who should get vaccinated first. But a lot of those 10,000 they're not from our county. So we would like to say, I have to be honest, we would like to be able to say Anne Arundel County residents only. We know that it's illegal for a state to refuse vaccinations to residents of other states. That's a federal law. It's federal vaccinations. It's unclear whether counties can say that as well, and we're trying to get clarification on that right now. But we're all desperate to try to get our vaccines into our residents' arms, and we don't make the decisions. The governor and the Maryland Department of Health make decisions about how many doses, not only for each county, but how many for each institution within the county. So hospitals and pharmacies. And the last notice that we got, it actually didn't tell us how many Giant was going to get. We found out later that they got 400 for each of their two pharmacies in the county. But we have a verbal notification that we're going to get 400 more doses than we did last week. So we got 3,000 last week. We were getting 5,000. We were cut to 3,000 last week. Now we're told we're going to get 3,400. And Arundel Medical Center, as you all know, got what was moved from 1,000 to 5,000 last week. Shocked even them. They gave us 2,000, so we wouldn't have to cancel people. Now we understand that they're going to be at 1,000. So we're assuming that others are going to pharmacies. We don't yet know. But the vaccine allocation process is very frustrating for all of us.
Thank you. Thank you for expanding on that, on my question. Thank you.
Delegate Chisholm.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. County Executive, for your testimony. You just referenced some data and talking about the map showing how the vaccine is being allocated. Is that public information, or is it any data that can be shared with us? Because I'd love to.
We can get that to you. Yeah, we just ran the numbers ourselves from the state's data. So the data is public, but we were frustrated in hearing from others in Central Maryland that because we knew that other counties more rural outside of Central Maryland were moving into phase 1C more quickly. And we were trying to figure out how that could be. Were they just skipping ahead to phase 1C? And no, as it turned out, that they were getting a lot more doses per capita through their health departments than we were.
Yes, because of social media, we do have constituents that call teachers from Anne Arundel County, or they see other people on Facebook or whatever getting vaccinated, and they're asking, where's our vaccines? And it would be nice to just have a data point to say, well, we're getting out whatever we can. This is where we are. So thank you. If you could share that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah.
Delegate Howard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was really my question, but I'd just like to make a 10-second comment. When I go to the dump, I have to show my license and that I'm an Anne Arundel County resident. So I'm just going to put that out there. I understand, where you're coming from on this one. I understand it's very frustrating. So I just, I heard Dr. K last week talk about, well, we're not police, we're not policing people and these type of things. And I understand that and I appreciate that. But, when I go to the dump, I have to show that I'm an Anne Arundel County resident to access that landfill. So, it just seems to me that would be applicable here. I don't know.
I agree with you 100%. It's exactly what we want to do, but we also don't want to go to jail for doing it. So we're just
right.
Yeah, we're trying to get authorization to do that.
Okay, very good. I see no further questions unless Delegate Lehman has another question.
No, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I just failed to lower my hand.
No problem. So with that, I'm going to move on. Thank you, Mr. County Executive. Thank you to all your administration for being here today. We appreciate the work that you do, and we're going to allow you an opportunity to go do it. So thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Does anyone have any announcements? I have one quick announcement. Remember to pay your dues. And our secretary sent out a reminder. I see Vice Chair Rogers nodding his head. Yes, I see you, Delegate Chisholm and Delegate Henson. Delegate Rogers, did you want to say something with respect to dues?
Yes, Madam Chair. I just wanted to reiterate that message that, please pay your dues so I don't have to come looking for you. That's part of my job description.
All right, Vice Chair Enforcer, thank you very much. Delegate Chisholm.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just a matter of personal privilege, tomorrow, because there's not a true polar bear plunge, we're doing a polar bear plunge in Severna Park next to Gary's Grill, in which many of you Democrats may want to do this. I will be sitting in a dunk tank for 30 minutes. If you come and make a donation, you can throw at that dunk tank. And tomorrow when I'm in, I think it's going to be about 35 degrees. So feel free to invite everybody that would like to take a shot at me and line up. And it's all going towards the Special Olympics, just like it is for the polar bear plunge. So we're doing everything we can just to continue to raise money, because it's one of the charities near and dear to my heart. So please come on out. Thank you for letting me make that announcement.
That's excellent, Delegate Chisholm, and thank you for your participation. That's very good. Delegate Henson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to make a correction on the record that the Public Health Committee will be meeting on February 4th at 10:30 a.m. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Wonderful. You all, I see no other hands raised, and yes, I do. Delegate Saab.
Well, I just came back and I just heard the end of Delegate Chisholm's announcement. So I will also be there and getting dunked. So whoever wants to either love me or don't love me, they want to get me in the cold water, be there too to help this great cause. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for your participation. And, they say that the cold water, winter bathing keeps you young. So thank you for doing it. I am ready to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
So moved.
We are adjourned at
Second.
9:54.
Second.